Last week, I published a two-sided scrubby dishcloth pattern for bulky machines. This week, I am testing the pattern and adapting it for standard and mid-gauge machines so that all of my knitting friends can use it. The cloth on the left was knitted on the standard gauge machine, 23 stitches, 30 rows. The cloth on the right was knitted on the mid-gauge machine, 27 stitches, 30 rows, and both are very, very similar to the one knitted on the bulky machine, 23 stitches and 30 rows. All employed Red Heart Scrubby yarn as the weaving yarn. Each of them has a different main yarn, which I describe as I'm knitting them in front of your eyes. And all of them tend to roll at the edges before they are wetted for use, although the bulky one did roll less than the other two. The other day, I made a two-sided scrubby. We're into do-it-yourself times because none of us can leave home and get anything new right now, not with these anyway. So I made it on the bulky, which is suitable for worsted weight yarn, and for this particular scrubby type yarn. This one is the Red Heart version. And it was a big success, and I suggest you watch it. But it was designed at the time only for the bulky. And I've gotten concerned about the fact that I left out all my friends who may not have multiple machines. So you're seeing the real-time experiment of adapting this pattern for the standard gauge and for the mid gauge. This is the standard. My first row was overly stiff. Next time I'll begin in waste yarn and hang the weighted comb in that. We don't want to put me and the machine through that again. I suggest you do the same. I love weighted combs like this one. The problem is when you hang them, the tines can be a little bit much up in the way of the brushes almost, and that makes the first row after hanging it stiff. So waste yarn fixes it. Knit 2 rows, then over under again with the manual weaving technique. When using manual weaving, I pretty much always try to let the machine knit back from hold. It just makes it a little bit easier. 1, 2, oh, that's going beautifully. Here are the particulars of making this work on the standard gauge machine. Every third needle. Another thing that may interest you to know is I'm using Caron Simply Soft for the reason that of number 4 weight yarns that'll work for this pattern easily, it's a little bit thinner than some, and that means that it's going to sit in the needle hooks and pull back of the standard gauge needles because their hooks are smaller, of course, than bulkies. It's going to do so more easily than a more robust number 4 weight yarn. It is a number 4, that's what it's labeled, and I agree, but it's on the light end. That's coming out fine. I'm going to go ahead and finish this off camera and then take it off and compare it to the other. But also, we're going to go on to a mid-gauge version in a minute, so stay tuned. Okay, let's go on to the mid-gauge version. This is my KX 350. Very, very much like your LK 150 or 140 if you have one. I first tried it on every other needle, and at least for this yarn, that was too spacious. But I know that this is not going to get the same gauge as the bulky version. So I'm using 27 needles instead of the 23 I used. Stitch size 7 is working in Mary Lou's, I think it's Liberty. Just a quick review, over, under, attempting to alternate which needles are over and which needles are under on successive wrap rows. And other than that, there's absolutely nothing to it. As a matter of fact, You can see how simple this is because I am unraveling an experiment, dropping the extra length down. I think we go over this one this time. That's what I mean. I was trying to determine which needle I last used. It's not super important that you get them just right, but an attempt at alternating seems like a good thing to me. So to review, this is manual weaving. It works on almost every machine. It does work best if you bring your needles out and allow them to knit back from hold, which is not something that can be done on a pass-up, so I'll have to put my thinking cap on with pass-ups in mind. And the majority of your weaving yarn, whatever it might be, will show up on the purl side of a knit woven fabric. So I will finish this up, get it off of the machine, and we will compare the 3 cloths. And as I showed you at the beginning, they turned out really similar and certainly useful for the same function.